Well, welcome back to the Atlanta Falcons franchise rebuild. Here today is part one of the offseason. Right now, we're just looking through the playoff picture, who made it, who didn't. We're very excited to see who makes it to the Super Bowl. Overall, my expectations is that we'll see two good teams. Looking through the stats now, Todd Gurley over 1,000 yards, Matt Ryan threw over 50 touchdowns, or I believe 49 touchdowns. He looked very good this year. Overall, position of running back's a major question mark. Julio Jones over 2,000 yards. Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurts, close to both 1,000 yards. Hurts would have hit 1,000 yards if he didn't get injured earlier in the year. Overall, I think the receivers played very good, and Julio Jones will be staying on this roster. We do have a couple moves that we need to make in free agency to fill the receiving core, but overall, I think we should be pretty good for next year. Looking at the defense, overall, we had a very good year between getting sacks and interceptions. Marlon, the rookie, led us in sacks, but we needed to definitely find a pass rusher. And as we all know, we need to find some new corners and safeties. I think Joe Hayden played very well when we brought him in, and AJ Terrell overall improved throughout the season. So we just have to kind of more or less help out this secondary this offseason and get a pass rusher. As now we're looking at the Pro Bowl, Matt Ryan makes the Pro Bowl for our team. I don't believe we had any other Pro Bowlers. Caden Smith, Julio Jones both made it as well from our team. Besides that, I don't think anyone else made it for us. But overall, happy with getting at least a few Pro Bowlers on this roster. So that's a good thing. And as we now see in the Super Bowl, it will be the Seattle Seahawks versus the LA Chargers. I believe this is the first Super Bowl a rookie quarterback makes it. And we're going to go quickly look at their stats, see how Justin Herbert played. We played them earlier in the year, or excuse me, late in the season and lost to them. So we kind of really helped them get to this point. Overall, they had a very good team and they looked, like a very good team to win the championship. When looking at the Seattle Seahawks, one concern that I had was Wilson and his turnovers, but overall, Seattle was a good team, and I think, overall, both teams looked very well. Both can create plays and stuff. As we're now going to be looking at retirements, and one thing about retirements is that both Brady and Drew Brees did not retire. Now, we did have a couple retires of our own. Alex Mack did retire. Donald Penn and Matt Schaub both retired. So we had a few retires, and the rest of the list, some big name players did retire as well. And at this moment in time, I was not looking to re-sign any players. I was just going to let everyone hit the open market as we see Baker Mayfield winning the MVP. And as I've said, I'm not going to be re-signing any of these players. I'm just going to let them all test the market. We don't have enough cap room to work with them. We have to give them small one-year deals. At this moment, we looked at regression, and overall, not too much regression. One player that I was very surprised to not be hit harder was Matt Ryan, who only went from an 85 to an 80. So overall, I'm expecting him to be our starting quarterback at the beginning of this season, but we will be targeting quarterback, especially in the draft. Still expecting high things from Matt Ryan. And the rest of the players, it was kind of standard regression for them. As we're now hitting the free agent period, at this moment in time, with only really $20 million to play with. And I believe at this moment, we only had like 40 players on the roster. We needed to mostly target small 1-year contracts. Now, the big question was for who will be replacing Neal at safety? Or could we bring Neal back? As well as can we find a corner? So we looked at some corners. I really didn't find anyone that I really was in love with. So, you know, but first we looked at Carl Joseph and Neal. Looking at both of them, I think Joseph and Neal could play the exact same role for this team. But just because I like the similarity, I was mostly considering Neal at this moment in time. I just had to really kind of sit back and think about it. Looking back at corner, I was mostly looking for someone young. And there wasn't that young guy besides, I believe, Mosley. And, as I continue looking through other corners, but I believe I do settle on giving an offer to Mosley to try to bring him in. Russell here, I wanted a sixth offensive lineman for this team, and Russell could definitely provide that. He could play both tackles. He potentially could play guard. He has good stats, so we're giving him a 1-year contract, hoping that he can come in as well. The next player we were trying to bring in was Everson Griffin. I wanted that another pass rusher in our rotation, and I felt he could stop the run and provide a bit of a pass rush. As I said earlier, we decided to make a 1-year contract to Mosley, hoping that he can come in here and potentially be one of our corners for this defense. We really needed corner. We did not have. We lost 2 of our starters in this offseason, so we needed to find someone to come in and help this secondary out. Now, we had to make the decision between both Neal and Carl Joseph. Looking at both of their stats, they're both pretty much the same players. So, at first I just decided to give the contract to Neal and hoping that after stage 1 we could bring Neal in. I didn't feel that we could sign him to a multi-year contract, so I elected to try to get him a 2-year contract. Like a lot of these contracts, they are very small, 2 to 1 year deals, just to see if they can come in and help this team out. Now, this is our first look at the draft class. As we see, we didn't really make any signings after stage 1. So we kind of just decided to move off of some players. I did make other small 1-year contracts, but, at this moment in time, Neal was going to go somewhere else. So we had to go with Carl Joseph, giving him hopefully a 2-year deal, hoping he can come in and play that run-stopping safety type role. I really like that. That's my strong safety personally. So that's that. This is the draft class with combine stats. Jay Conley, my number 1 quarterback on the board. There was 4 quarterbacks in this draft class. Conley was the only quarterback that I was looking to trade up to go get, but I didn't really expect us to go after him. To me, he looked like a perfect fit to what I wanted to run. There were 2 other quarterbacks, the River brothers, who I also really liked. I didn't know which one we were going to target, if we could target one of them, but Jay was definitely the number 1 on my board. Here we get to see the 2 River brothers and what they look like overall. And then, of course, Luther Glass, who was mostly the project in this draft class. I was going to consider drafting him in the 6th, 7th round if we had an opportunity. When looking at the running backs, I wanted to find a new running back. Now, looking at Gabe Mins here, 4.27 40 speed. This kid was fast at 5'7". I had immediate interest in him, but I knew I couldn't draft him in the first 2 rounds. It just didn't make sense for our team, especially with this draft class being loaded with running backs. But Gabe, wherever he goes, I think he will be becoming an explosive player for any offense. And overall, as you see, Freddie Kidd here, another good running back. James White, another solid rotational running back. Julius Overton, another good running back with mid-1 talent. Deion Starks, the big 6'4" power back, a guy I had a lot of interest in because he intrigued me at 6'4". Could he make some plays? And then finally, Akeem Tucker all the way in the back end of the draft. Hey, here's a 20-year-old running back with mid-1 talent. Of course I'm interested in him. We have a bunch of wide receivers here. I didn't really know if I was going to target a wide receiver early on. It was mostly just to do my homework on them. But, I was very surprised at this moment in time in my live commentary on how fast these players were. And overall, I was excited. Jeff Altman here was number 2 in speed. I was very interested in him as well, but I knew we couldn't target a wide receiver. Looking through the rest of these guys, looking at just what they could potentially bring to this team. And ultimately, Nick St. Clair here as a big physical receiver, really liked him. Didn't know if we could get him maybe later in the draft. John Thomas, another good receiver. I didn't really expect to draft him, mostly looking at just the draft grades right there. And then Parrish Colombo here at number 1 in speed, mid-second round talent. He's someone I had high interest in because of the fact that I knew I could get him later in the draft, which is something I wanted to do. When you're looking through this offensive line class, there was really nothing that I was going to target except for George Duncan. Duncan was the guy that I wanted to replace Alex Mack from day one when first looking at this class. I feel he's coming out as the best offensive lineman, and he was our number 1 target when looking at all these offensive linemen. When looking at the pass rushers, there weren't any ones at defensive end, at right or left, that was really projected early in projected first round, but later rounds there were some players that I found at least intrigued me, but I didn't really know if we were going to really target one. As I looked at actually Coffee here, late 1 talent, had an interest in him. Dakota Holiday, another player. Overall, these players look like quality depth defensive linemen, and that intrigued me. It really did. I was hoping that we could definitely draft one of them, and I was looking to draft one of them. When looking at defensive tackle with Grady Jarrett, and really overall, I felt the interior of the defensive line was okay. But Nate Waters here, strong, fast, at 6'7", 21 years old, this was my guy. I really wanted Nate Waters on this roster because I felt that he could play defensive end or defensive tackle for us. When looking at these inside linebackers, I really didn't know if I was going to target any of them just because of our linebackers and what they already can do coverage-wise. At this moment in time, Chat was like 6'7" at linebacker, and I completely understood. How the heck did an auto-generated draft class have a 6'7" pass rusher at linebacker that can move like him? Which just immediately intrigued me and Chat, so Nate was high on our boards. When looking at corner, I've said it all year long, there isn't any good corners in this draft class that really have any coverage ability. I didn't know who was good in coverage. I knew that they could play, but I didn't know if they could go out there and be a day 1 starter, but that's the thing that we needed the most. So I really kind of decided to kind of forget about corner for a minute and hope that we could potentially bring in some veterans to really overall help this team. Even at safety, there really wasn't any opportunities to draft someone. And, Stephen Collins here, he was a guy that had coverage in his slot that I found him intrigued. Found Brian Johnson here intrigued because of his speed, and Collins just because of his coverage ability and hoping that potentially he could be good. He was fastest in the class, which intrigued me as well. I like my speed at certain positions. Moving to the next stage here, We did bring in Carl Joseph, Russell, and Taysom Hill. I wanted to bring in a veteran backup quarterback. As now we're going to be doing 5th-year options. This one is for Hayden Hurts. I didn't know if I was going to keep him. I decided not to. Maybe we could get him for a smaller contract next year. Just deal with that next year. And then Calvin Ridley's contract, obviously picking this up. It's about an $11 million increase to his regular base salary. So overall, I'm okay with it. Really kind of like the final look at this draft class going into. Overall, my strategy, get a quarterback, get a pass rusher, get an offensive lineman, help this team out. As we're just going to do some basic just scouting, seeing some defensive tackles. Maybe we can find a depth player, but there was plenty of them. So if we really wanted to focus on it, we could. I kind of decided not to in part 2 of this, but overall, I was looking at them just to make sure. At this moment in time, I wanted to look for a trade. I wanted to trade Russell Gates. He's a wide receiver that, overall, I really didn't think he played a major role for this team. And I settled on Seattle. I thought he had a good opportunity. I looked around. I said, you know what? A 4th-round pick. We got it accepted. Happy that worked out for us. As now we're looking at this roster here, we need to find a running back, a quarter. We really just needed to hit on every position. I knew going into this draft class, I wanted to find a running back and bring in a veteran, and that was probably going to have to happen after the draft to do so. But Ito Smith is expected to have an important role for this team. I think Smith can make plays out of the backfield as a receiver. At wide receiver, we needed to find our number 3 wideout, and I felt Colombo could be that potential late-round prospect for us. But there was other receivers that I was looking at, as Matt Ryan did go up in a development trade, going from star to superstar because of the fact he threw 47 touchdowns, but 23 interceptions. That's the number one thing we have to really work on for this team, is not to throw so many freaking turnovers. The tight end group, didn't really expect to make any more changes with it. I kind of decided not to really focus on it. I think Hayden Hurts can play for another year and be solid for us. When looking at the offensive line, overall, I just kind of forgot about it, to be honest with you guys. I knew we needed a center, so we decided to move Matt just in case to center, just because I felt it was necessary. Overall wise, just for precautions, George Duncan was still my number 1 offensive lineman on my board. At this moment in time, this draft class, we just needed to hit depth. We needed depth on this team. And, Everson Griffin, he was going to provide that for us. We needed just depth at every position. We needed a few more starters to really kind of get to where I felt we could be. And overall, I was getting more and more excited for this draft class. Chat, I know, was getting excited as well. Depth is probably the number 1 thing, and finding corners. Corners was a big thing. Veterans were probably going to be the direction that I was going to take it, as we did get Carl Joseph as well. And now we're going to be taking a quick look at some of the free agent signings. Overall, the Panthers and the Ravens made a lot of the big name free agent signings. And if you're new here and you want to see part 2, please leave a comment down below. It really helps me out, and subscribe. As there's a bunch of free agents that were signed to other teams, and overall, a lot of teams improved. Not a lot of our division, though. One thing I did notice, that the division didn't really, Panthers, Saints, and the Bucks didn't go after many players. So it really kind of told me that, okay, they're going to probably end up staying the same. So we really needed to hit on this draft class to contend more this up-and-coming season. So again, thank you guys for watching. I am going to be editing part 2 of this. So again, please leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe. See you soon.